The shocking death of Elvis Presley. Secrets hidden inside Graceland. What if I told you that behind the gates of Graceland, America's king was fighting a battle that would ultimately claim his life? On a sweltering August afternoon in Memphis, the world lost more than just a musician. They lost a cultural icon whose final days were shrouded in mystery, pain, and desperate attempts to reclaim the magic that once made him the most famous man on earth. The truth about Elvis Presley's death isn't just about what happened on that bathroom floor. It's about the tragic spiral of a man who gave everything to his art, his fans, and his country, only to find himself trapped in a golden cage of his own making. Today, we're going inside Graceland's walls to uncover the real story of Elvis's final chapter and understand how a poor boy from Tupelo became both a legend and a cautionary tale. The last days of the King picture. It's August 1977, and the man once known for his electrifying performances and perfect pompadour is barely recognizable. Elvis Aaron Presley, just 42 years old, moves through the halls of Graceland like a ghost haunting his own mansion. His face, once the epitome of youthful rebellion and raw sexuality, is now bloated from years of prescription drug abuse. His legendary black hair, now dyed and thinning, frames a face that tells the story of too much fame, too much pressure, and too much pain. The Memphis heat feels oppressive, but inside Graceland's air-conditioned cocoon, Elvis exists in a different world entirely. He sleeps during the day and comes alive at night, a vampire-like existence that has become his norm. His entourage, the infamous Memphis Mafia, still surrounds him, but the dynamic has shifted. Where once they were partners in adventure and mischief, now they're more like caretakers watching over a fallen king. Dr. George Nicopolis, known to everyone as Dr. Nick, has become a constant presence. The pills flow like water, uppers to wake him, downers to sleep him, painkillers to numb everything in between. Dilaudid, Demerol, Percodan, Placidil, Valmid, Tuinal, the pharmaceutical cocktail that Elvis relies on reads like a pharmacist's nightmare. But who's going to say no to Elvis Presley? Who's going to be the one to tell the king he's killing himself? His daughter, Lisa Marie, just 9 years old, visits from Los Angeles with her mother Priscilla. She sees her father's condition but doesn't fully understand what's happening to the man who once seemed larger than life. When Elvis holds her, his hands shake slightly and his voice carries a weariness that wasn't there in the early days of their relationship. The last few weeks of July and early August are a blur of cancelled plans and half-hearted attempts at normalcy. Elvis talks about returning to touring, about recording new music, about getting his life back on track. But these are the desperate promises of a man who knows deep down that he's running out of time. His spiritual advisor, Larry Geller, notices the change too. Elvis speaks more frequently about death, about what comes after, about whether he'll be remembered for his music or his mistakes. On August 15th, Elvis visits his dentist, Dr. Lester Hoffman, for what would be his final medical appointment. He seems agitated, uncomfortable, talking about plans for the upcoming tour that's scheduled to begin in just 2 weeks. That evening, he returns to Graceland and spends time with his girlfriend, Ginger Alden, a young beauty queen who has become his constant companion in these final months. She would later describe him as unusually affectionate that night, almost as if he sensed something was coming. From Tupelo to stardom, the rise of a legend. But how did we get here? How did a shy kid from one of America's poorest states become the king of rock and roll, only to die alone on a bathroom floor? The story begins in a 2-room shotgun house in Tupelo, Mississippi, where on January 8, 1935, Gladys Presley gives birth to twin boys. One is stillborn, but the other, Elvis Aaron Presley, enters the world with enough life force for both of them. Growing up in poverty shapes Elvis in ways that will haunt him forever. His mother Gladys becomes his everything, his protector, his first love, his anchor in a world that often seems hostile and unforgiving. When Elvis is 11, his parents buy him a guitar instead of the bicycle he wanted for his birthday. It's a decision that will change the course of music history, though nobody knows it at the time. The Presley family moves to Memphis in 1948, hoping for better opportunities. 13-year-old Elvis is a fish out of water in the big city, his thick Mississippi accent and unusual style making him a target for bullies. But music becomes his escape, his language, his way of connecting with a world that doesn't quite know what to make of him. On a hot summer day in 1954, 18-year-old Elvis walks into Sun Records at 706 Union Avenue. He pays $4 to record My Happiness, and that's when your heartaches begin, as a birthday present for his mother. Or so the story goes. The truth might be simpler. Maybe he just wanted to hear his own voice played back to him, to see if he really had something special. That something special catches the attention of Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records, who has supposedly been saying he could make a fortune if he could find a white man who could sing like a black man. When Phillips pairs Elvis with guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black, magic happens. During a break in the recording session, Elvis starts fooling around with an old Arthur Crudup song called That's All Right. The sound that emerges is unlike anything anyone has heard before. It's country, it's blues, it's gospel, it's rock and roll before rock and roll even has a name. The local Memphis DJ, Dewey Phillips, plays the record on his radio show, and the phones at the station light up. Who is this singer? What race is he? Where did this sound come from? Elvis has to come to the studio that night to prove he's real, that this isn't some kind of elaborate hoax, but success doesn't come overnight. For months, Elvis, Scotty, and Bill drive across the South, playing honky-tonks, high school auditoriums, and any venue that will have them. The reaction is always extreme. Audiences either love Elvis or hate him. There's no middle ground when it comes to the boy who moves his hips like that, who sings with such raw emotion, who seems to channel something primal and dangerous. The turning point comes when Colonel Tom Parker, a carnival barker turned music manager, takes over Elvis's career. Parker is a master promoter who understands that Elvis isn't just a singer. He's a brand, a phenomenon, a lightning bolt that needs to be carefully controlled and marketed. In 1955, Parker orchestrates Elvis's move from Sun Records to RCA Victor for the then astronomical sum of $35,000. Heartbreak Hotel, released in January 1956, becomes Elvis's first national hit, climbing to #1 on the country charts and crossing over to pop and R&B. But it's his appearances on television that truly launch him into the stratosphere. The Dorsey Brothers stage show, the Milton Berle show, the Steve Allen show. Each appearance generates more controversy and more fans. Then comes the Ed Sullivan Show. Sullivan, initially resistant to booking the controversial singer, finally relents after Elvis's enormous ratings on competing shows. The 3 appearances on Sullivan's show are watched by over 60 million Americans, more than 80% of the television audience at the time. After the final performance, Sullivan himself declares Elvis a real decent fine boy. Hollywood comes calling, and Elvis's movie career begins with Love Me Tender in 1956. For a brief moment, it seems like Elvis might become a serious actor, but the lure of easy money and formulaic musical films proves too strong. Movie after movie follows the same basic template. Elvis plays a character who sings, falls in love, and inevitably wins the girl by the final reel. During this period, the most significant event in Elvis's personal life occurs when he's drafted into the Army in 1958. Many wonder if this will end his career, but Elvis serves dutifully, even turning down special treatment that would have allowed him to avoid combat duty. His service in Germany introduces him to Priscilla Beaulieu, a 14-year-old Army colonel's daughter who will become the love of his life and, eventually, his wife. The death of his mother Gladys in August 1958, while Elvis is serving in Germany, devastates him in ways that few people understand. She was his emotional anchor, his greatest supporter, his most devoted fan. Her death creates a void in Elvis's life that he will spend the rest of his years trying to fill, often with the wrong things and the wrong people. When Elvis returns from the Army in 1960, the music world has changed. A new generation of performers has emerged, and rock and roll has evolved beyond his original sound. But Elvis adapts, recording some of his most enduring music during this period, including the gospel album His Hand in Mine and the blues-influenced Elvis Is Back, out the Vegas years and declining health. By the late 1960s, Elvis realizes he needs to reinvent himself once again. The movie career that once seemed so promising has become a creative dead end, churning out forgettable films that do little more than showcase his singing voice. The world of music has exploded with innovation. The Beatles, Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, while Elvis seems stuck in a time warp of his own creation. The comeback happens on December 3, 1968, when NBC airs Elvis, later known as the '68 Comeback Special. Dressed in black leather, Elvis performs with an intimacy and intensity that reminds everyone why he became famous in the first place. The special is a massive success, proving that Elvis still has the power to captivate audiences. This leads to what many consider Elvis's final creative peak, his Las Vegas residency at the International Hotel, later the Hilton. Beginning in July 1969, Elvis performs 2 shows a night, 7 days a week for months at a time. The performances are spectacular, featuring his full range as a vocalist and his charismatic stage presence. Songs like Suspicious Minds and In the Ghetto show that Elvis can still create relevant, powerful music. But Vegas is also where the wheels begin to come off. The grueling schedule, the pressure to be on every single night, the isolation of performing the same venue repeatedly, it all takes its toll. Elvis begins relying more heavily on prescription drugs to maintain his energy levels and cope with the stress. His marriage to Priscilla, never strong to begin with, crumbles under the weight of his career and his increasing drug use. The divorce in 1973 devastates Elvis, even though he and Priscilla had been growing apart for years. He throws himself into work even more intensely, but the performances become increasingly erratic. Stories begin circulating about Elvis's behavior on stage, forgetting lyrics, rambling between songs, sometimes appearing disoriented or overly emotional. The man who once epitomized cool confidence now seems vulnerable, almost desperate. His weight fluctuates dramatically as his drug use intensifies. Dr. Nichopoulos later admits to prescribing over 10,000 doses of various drugs to Elvis in the final year of his life alone. The final tour in June 1977 is painful to watch. Video footage shows a bloated, exhausted Elvis struggling through performances that once came naturally to him. His voice, still powerful, can't disguise the physical deterioration that's obvious to anyone paying attention. After the last show in Indianapolis on June 26th, Elvis returns to Graceland, never to perform again. The final hours, August 16, 1977, begins like many other days in Elvis's upside-down world. He sleeps late into the afternoon, finally emerging around 4 p.m. Ginger Alden is with him, and they spend the evening planning for the upcoming tour that's supposed to begin in Portland, Maine, on August 17th. Elvis seems excited about getting back on stage, talking about new songs he wants to add to the set list. Around 10:30 p.m., Elvis visits his doctor to address a problem with a dental crown. Dr. Nichopoulos prescribes additional pain medication, adding to the cocktail of drugs already in Elvis's system. When they return to Graceland, Elvis isn't ready for sleep. His body clock, after years of nocturnal living, keeps him wired and restless. He spends time at the piano, playing gospel songs and talking about spiritual matters. His cousin, Billy Smith, later remembers Elvis seeming unusually reflective that night, almost philosophical about life and death. Around midnight, Elvis plays racquetball with some of the Memphis Mafia members, working up a sweat and seeming to enjoy himself. But by 2 a.m., the familiar routine kicks in. Elvis needs his pills to sleep. Dr. Nichopoulos has prescribed a sleep packet containing several different medications. Elvis takes them and retires to his bedroom with Ginger, but sleep doesn't come easily. He's restless, getting up several times, his mind racing despite the pharmaceutical assistance. Around 4 a.m., Elvis gets up again, this time heading to his bathroom with a book, A Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus by Frank Adams. He tells Ginger he's going to read for a while and not to wait up for him. These are the last words he will ever speak to anyone. What happens next remains a mystery. Sometime between 4 a.m. and the afternoon of August 16th, Elvis Presley dies. The official cause of death will be listed as cardiac arrhythmia, essentially a heart attack, but the real story is far more complicated. Ginger Alden finds him around 2:15 p.m., face down on the bathroom floor, the book still nearby. She calls for help, and within minutes, Graceland erupts into chaos. The Memphis Mafia springs into action, calling Dr. Nichopoulos, calling an ambulance, trying desperately to revive a man who is already gone. The ambulance rushes Elvis to Baptist Memorial Hospital, where doctors work frantically to restart his heart. But it's too late. At 3:30 p.m., Elvis Aaron Presley is pronounced dead. The king is gone, and the world will never be quite the same. The aftermath and truth behind the death. The news spreads like wildfire. Radio stations interrupt regular programming, television networks break into scheduled shows, and within hours the world knows that Elvis Presley is dead. Fans begin gathering outside Graceland immediately, many refusing to believe the news. How could someone so young, so vibrant, so alive just disappear? The official autopsy, conducted by Dr. Jerry Francisco, determines that Elvis died of cardiac arrhythmia, with no mention of drugs playing a role. But this official version quickly comes under scrutiny. The Presley family, desperate to protect Elvis's image, pressures officials to downplay any drug involvement. They succeed, at least initially. However, the truth eventually emerges through investigative reporting and later testimony. Elvis's blood contained significant levels of multiple drugs at the time of his death. Codeine was found in amounts 10 times the therapeutic level. Methaqualone, barbiturates, and other substances created a lethal cocktail that overwhelmed his system. In essence, Elvis Presley died of polypharmacy, multiple drug intoxication, though this wouldn't be officially acknowledged for years. Dr. Nicopoulos, Elvis's personal physician, becomes a central figure in the controversy. Investigation reveals that he had prescribed thousands of pills to Elvis in the months leading up to his death. While Dr. Nick maintains that he was trying to help Elvis control his addiction by providing pharmaceutical-grade drugs instead of street drugs, critics argue that he enabled the very addiction that killed the king. The reaction from fans is unprecedented. Over 100,000 people line the streets of Memphis for Elvis's funeral procession. Flowers pour in from around the world. Radio stations play Elvis music non-stop. Sales of his records skyrocket as people try to cope with the loss by immersing themselves in his music. Fellow musicians struggle to express their grief and shock. John Lennon, once dismissive of Elvis's later career, admits that Elvis was a major influence on the Beatles. Frank Sinatra, who had once criticized Elvis as a bad influence on youth, now praises him as a great talent and a good person. Country legend Hank Williams Jr. sums up the feeling of many when he says, "It was like someone turned the lights out on music." President Jimmy Carter issues a statement acknowledging Elvis's contribution to American culture, saying, "His music and his personality, fusing the styles of white country and black rhythm and blues, permanently changed the face of American popular culture." Even critics who had been harsh during Elvis's lifetime now recognize his enormous cultural impact. But perhaps the most poignant reaction comes from ordinary fans who feel like they've lost a family member. Elvis wasn't just an entertainer to them. He was a symbol of possibilities, of breaking free from constraints, of the American dream made manifest. His death represents the end of an era, the final closing of the door on the optimistic, rebellious spirit of the 1950s and early 1960s. Chawa. The enduring legacy of the king. Now, more than 4 decades after his death, how do we measure the impact of Elvis Aaron Presley? The numbers tell part of the story. Over 1 billion records sold worldwide, more gold and platinum albums than any solo artist in history, induction into multiple halls of fame. But statistics can't capture the full scope of what Elvis meant and continues to mean to our culture. Elvis didn't invent rock and roll, but he certainly popularized it and made it safe for mainstream America. He took the music of African American artists and, while maintaining its raw power and emotion, presented it in a way that white audiences could embrace. This was both his greatest achievement and his most controversial legacy. Some critics argue that Elvis was a cultural appropriator who profited from black music without giving adequate credit to its originators. Others contend that he genuinely loved and respected the music and helped break down racial barriers by introducing white audiences to sounds they might never have otherwise discovered. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. Elvis genuinely loved gospel, blues, and country music, and his versions weren't mere copies but genuine interpretations that added something new to the original songs. At the same time, it's undeniable that his race and appearance gave him opportunities that weren't available to the black artists who had created many of the songs he made famous. What's indisputable is Elvis's role in changing American culture. Before Elvis, popular music was largely segregated. White artists performed for white audiences, black artists for black audiences, and never the twain shall meet. Elvis helped blow up these artificial barriers, creating a shared musical language that transcended racial lines, at least somewhat. His influence on fashion and style was equally revolutionary. The pompadour hairstyle, the sideburns, the flashy clothes, Elvis made it cool for men to care about their appearance in ways that had previously been considered feminine. The leather outfits, the sequined jumpsuits, the dramatic capes. Elvis understood that performance was as much about visual impact as musical talent. But perhaps Elvis's most important legacy is what he represented to ordinary people. Here was a kid from one of the poorest places in America who became the most famous person in the world. He proved that talent and charisma could overcome almost any obstacle, that the American dream was real and achievable. For millions of young people in the 1950s and beyond, Elvis represented freedom, rebellion, and the possibility of reinvention. His influence on subsequent musicians is incalculable. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, and countless others have acknowledged his impact on their music and careers. Every male performer who moves on stage, who uses his sexuality as part of his appeal, who treats a microphone as an extension of his body, owes a debt to Elvis Presley. Even his tragic end serves as a cautionary tale about the price of fame and the dangers of excess. Elvis's death sparked important conversations about prescription drug abuse, the responsibilities of physicians treating celebrities, and the isolation that can come with enormous success. His story reminds us that behind the glitter and glamour of celebrity culture are real human beings struggling with real problems. Today, Graceland welcomes over 600,000 visitors annually, making it one of the most visited homes in America after the White House. People come from around the world to pay their respects, to try to understand the man behind the legend, to connect with something authentic in an increasingly manufactured world. Elvis Presley died at 42, far too young, having given everything he had to his art and his fans. He left behind a daughter who carries his name and his legacy, a body of music that continues to inspire new generations, and a cultural impact that extends far beyond entertainment. He was flawed, human, and real in ways that made him more relatable, not less. Was Elvis Presley the king of rock and roll? That's a title that will always be debated, but what's certain is that he was one of the most important cultural figures of the 20th century. He changed how we think about music, style, celebrity, and the possibilities of American life. His voice, his image, and his story continue to resonate because they speak to something fundamental about the human experience, the desire to be heard, to be loved, and to leave something meaningful behind. The boy from Tupelo, who wanted to make his mama proud, became so much more than he ever dreamed possible. And maybe, in the end, that's the most important part of his legacy. The reminder that all of us, no matter where we come from or what obstacles we face, have the potential to touch the world in ways we can't even imagine. Elvis has left the building, but his spirit, his music, and his influence will live on forever. That's the true measure of a king.